Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping on our conceptual sandals, heading way back to antiquity. We're tackling one of the really big questions. How do we actually perceive objects that are, far away from us?
It's a huge question, and it really set the stage for so much Western thought. We're digging into the sources today to look at this massive shift from the earliest, very literal ideas about perception to something much more abstract, much more sophisticated.
Right, tracing that leap from what you might call a material theory, the idea that seeing involves actually physically taking in matter.
To Aristotle's really groundbreaking formal theory, the idea that perception happens by assimilating form, but without the matter.
And exploring this ancient stuff, as our sources suggest, is actually really useful for us now. It helps kind of loosen the grip of the modern way we tend to think about color.
Exactly. The modern view often treats color as just a secondary quality, something happening in our heads, a reaction. But the ancients, particularly Aristotle, pushed toward a strong perceptual realism. Color is out there, in the object, whether we see it or not.
Before we dive into the theories themselves, we should probably touch on this kind of baseline assumption they had, this really common use of touch metaphors for seeing. We still say we grasp an idea or have perceptual contact.
And that language wasn't just poetic. It reflected a deep-seated idea. If you're aware of something, you must somehow be in contact with it. And the earliest thinkers, like Empedocles, they took that literally. How does that tree across the field touch your eye? That was the puzzle.
Okay, so let's unpack Empedocles' answer first. It often comes through figures like Gorgias in Plato. What's the core idea? Material effluences.
Precisely. For Empedocles, seeing is, well, it's a material process. Objects are constantly emitting these things called effluences. Think of them as tiny, fine material particles, and they differ mainly in their size, their magnitude.
So you've got these particles flying off objects, hitting your eye, but that's not enough, right? You have to actually assimilate them.
Yes, assimilation is key. And this wasn't just for sight. It was the model for all senses. For Empedocles, to be perceptible just means to be palpable to the sense organ. It has to make physical contact. So these effluences, these particles, have to be the right size, commensurate is the term, with the tiny passages or pores in the eye's membrane. It's basically an ingestion model for seeing.
He even had a specific idea about the eye structure, didn't he? Tying it into the elements fire, water.
Oh yeah, quite detailed for the time. He thought the passages in the eye membrane were arranged alternately of fire and water. And crucially, he believed the eye emits fire from within, like a lantern.
Wait, the eye emits fire not just to see by, but as part of the mechanism.
Right. This internal fire supposedly lines the fire passages, making them narrower.
Okay, so the eye's fire acts like a filter.
Pretty much. Because the fire passage is narrowed, only the really fine effluences can get through these, were thought to be the white ones, associated with fire. The wider passages, the water ones, are lined with, well, water lacrimal fluid, and they let in the larger watery effluences, which correspond to black. So color perception is directly tied to the size and elemental nature of the particle being swallowed by the eye.
But if the eye is shooting out fire, doesn't that kind of interfere with the thing you're looking at? It seems like you'd be changing the object just by looking at it.
That's a great point, and it highlights a tension in any material contact theory. How does this interaction happen without depleting or altering the object? But the even bigger puzzle, the aporia, that Aristotle really zeroed in on, comes when you compare this mechanism to our actual experience of seeing.
Right, the conflict between two basic facts. Fact one, the things we see, the colored objects, are external and at a distance.
In fact, two, the Empedocles rule. To be perceived, something must be in contact with the sense organ. How can you be in contact with something that's far away? It seems impossible.
And if seeing means taking in these effluences, then what you're immediately aware of is the particle that just entered your eye, not the tree itself.
Exactly. That effluence becomes a sort of screen.
Yeah.
It blocks your direct access to the distant object that emitted it. This is, an early version of what later philosophers like Berkeley worried about. If we only ever perceive these immediate intermediaries, particles, sense data, whatever, how do we know the external world is really there? Empedocles, trying to guarantee perception through physical contact, ironically opened the door to skepticism about perceiving reality itself.
So this is where Aristotle comes in with his typical method. He looks at what people like Empedocles said.
Right. He starts with the endoxa, the reputable opinions. He doesn't just dismiss them. He finds the aporiae, the puzzles or contradictions within them, and then he tries to refine the ideas, keep the truth, discard the error. It's about making genuine progress, not just disagreeing.
And his first big move is to just flat out reject that core Empedoclean idea that perception needs physical contact.
Totally rejects it. In fact, he flips it. Aristotle's counter-principle is, to be palpable is to be imperceptible, at least for sight. Think about it, if you put paint directly on your eyeball, you don't see the color, do you? You see nothing. Perception is blocked. Why? Because seeing requires having a view of the object, and that absolutely requires distance, remoteness. You need space.
That makes intuitive sense. And he backs this up biologically, too, with the locomotion argument.
Yeah, it's a teleological point looking at the purpose of things in nature. Animals that move around, that have locomotion, need distant senses like sight and hearing. How else would they find food or avoid predators before they bump into them? If seeing required touching, walking around would be pointless, even dangerous. Nature gave us sight to perceive things at a distance for survival.
So he's dismantled the need for contact, both physically and biologically. Then he moves to defend the reality of the object itself, perceptual realism.
Yes, if we're not ingesting particles. He needs to firmly establish that the thing we perceive exists independently, out there, before we even look at it. He argues the perceptible object is prior to perception, both in existence and in time.
That's a powerful stance against any kind of subjectivity.
Absolutely.
Right.
His argument is straightforward. Things like fire, water, earth, perceptible thing, existed long before animals, the perceivers, ever did. Therefore, their sensible qualities, like color, must belong to them independently of being perceived. It's a direct hit against Protagoras, man is the measure, and also against people like Parmenides or Democritus, who thought color wasn't real, just conventional or subjective.
And he reinforces this external reality by distinguishing how perception works versus how knowledge works.
A really crucial distinction. Knowledge is about universals, abstract concepts like treeness or justice. These are, in a sense, within the soul, and we can think about them whenever we want. But perception, that apprehends individuals, particular things out there. This specific apple, that particular patch of blue sky. And you can't just decide to perceive them. The object has to be present, acting on your senses. Perception is our direct line to the independent, particular things in the world.
Okay, so seeing requires distance. The object is real and external. But we still need a mechanism. If effluences are out, and Aristotle doesn't believe in action at a distance, something must connect the object to the eye.
Precisely. There has to be an intervening medium. This leads him to criticize Democritus's thought experiment. Democritus imagined seeing an ant on the distant vault of the sky if the space between was totally empty.
And Aristotle's response is basically no way. If there was literally nothing between you and the ant, you'd see nothing at all. The medium is essential.
This medium is what he calls the transparent. And transparent here doesn't just mean see-through. It's a potential, a common nature found in things like air or water, maybe even the celestial ether, a capacity to be affected by light, by the fiery substance.
Which brings us to his really unique idea about light itself. It's not a body, right? Because it can't occupy the same space as the air or water that's already there.
Correct. Light, for Aristotle, is a state, the Greek word is hexis. Specifically, it's the state of illumination. Light is the condition the potentially transparent medium is in when it becomes actually transparent, when it's lit up. It's not a thing, but an activation of a potential caused by this incorporeal fiery activity. Think Heraclitus.
And this leads to that idea that seems really weird to us now. Light doesn't move.
Yeah.
Because it's a state.
Exactly. States, being qualities or conditions, don't have a location in the same way bodies do. So they can't change location, they can't undergo locomotion. His empirical argument is, look at sunrise. You don't see light physically traveling across the sky from the east. The whole region just lights up, seemingly all at once.
But hang on, how would he explain something like, say, the shadow of the moon moving across the earth during an eclipse? That looks like light, or its absence, traveling.
He'd likely argue that what you're seeing move is the illuminated body, the air, the atmosphere, or the body casting the shadow. The state of illumination itself is instantaneous across a unified region. When the sun hits the air becomes illuminated instantly. Any apparent travel is the movement of the medium carrying the state, not the state itself traveling independently. It's a metaphysical point, really crucial for avoiding those old material particle theories. If light moved like a body, we'd be back to Empedocles' problems.
Okay, so we need a medium, and light is the state of that medium being illuminated. This finally lets Aristotle define color.
Yes. His definition is, color is the power to move what is actually transparent. Sounds simple, but it's loaded. Let's break it down.
Okay, first part. Color is a power of external objects. Realism again.
Right. The apple have the power to look red, even in the dark. Second, This power acts on the illuminated medium, the air, the water, not directly on the eye. That avoids the contact problem. The color changes the light-filled air, and that affects the eye.
Third, the movement it causes in the medium isn't physical travel, it's a change, an alteration kinesis.
And fourth, this can only happen when the medium is actually transparent, i.e. illuminated. In the dark, the potentially transparent medium isn't active, so the color's power can't do anything.
This is really quite remarkable. When you put it like that, it's almost like, well, like a precursor to modern ideas about reflectance. Color is a power to affect light.
It absolutely is. It's an ancient version of saying color is the object's disposition to modify light by reflecting it, transmitting it, whatever. The specific way it modifies the light, the ratio of light and dark involved, is the color. He brilliantly solved the material problem by making color about the object's relationship to light.
So if color is about affecting light, how do we get the whole rainbow of hues?
Through what he calls chromatic harmony. It all stems from the two basic contraries. White, leucon, which is the presence of the fiery substance, pure light or brightness, and black, melaton, its absence, pure darkness.
And all the other colors, reds, blues, greens, are just different ratios of light and dark. It's crucial to remember this isn't about mixing pigments, white and black paint.
Definitely not paint. It's about mixing brightness and darkness. Ancient Greek color terms often focus more on luminosity than hue, as we categorize it. So red is one ratio of light to dark, blue another, and so on. There are intermediates between pure bright and pure dark.
Does this hold up, empirically?
Well, he didn't have spectrographs. But he uses examples that are quite convincing. Think about seeing the bright white sun appear red or crimson when you look at it through fog or smoke.
Ah, okay. The dark particles in the smoke reduce the sun's brilliance. They alter the light-dark ratio reaching your eye, and boom, you see red instead of white.
Exactly. And, there's even a modern phenomenon, the Benham disc. You spin a disc that's half black, half white with some black arcs on the white part, and people see faint rings of color, red, green, blue. It shows that just by presenting the eye with rapidly changing patterns of black and white, temporally integrated, you can elicit chromatic experiences. So the underlying principal ratios of light-dark generating color isn't completely outlandish.
So how did Aristotle think this mixing of light and dark actually happened physically? He considered a few models, right? Like juxtaposition.
Yes, the first idea was juxtaposition. Maybe colors are made of tiny, invisible patches of black and white mixed together, like pointillism. Think of the sea appearing blue. Maybe it's really tiny black and white parts. But he rejected this, mainly because he wasn't keen on the idea of things being made of parts too small to ever be seen, these imperceptible magnitudes.
Okay, what about the second model, overlap, like the sun through smoke example?
Overlap, or superposition. A darker, semi-transparent layer, smoke, over a lighter background sun. This works well for appearances, but he rejected it as the fundamental explanation for what color is. Why? Because it makes the object's actual color seem dependent on viewing conditions, like distance or intervening stuff. It confuses the appearance of color with the stable quality of color inherent in the object. Realism demands the color itself doesn't change just because there's fog.
Which leaves his preferred model, mixture, based on older ideas about elements transforming into one another.
Right. He suggests hues are generated by mixing different substances or elemental compounds, and these compounds naturally possess different degrees of transparency, different levels of receptivity to that fiery, illuminating substance.
But this runs into philosophical problems, doesn't it? How do you mix qualities like light and dark? They don't exist separately.
That's the first puzzle. Qualities aren't like ingredients you can pour into a bowl. They belong to substances.
And the second puzzle. Darkness is just the absence of light, a privation. You can't mix nothing with something. Absences don't mix.
Exactly. So Aristotle gets subtle here. You don't mix the qualities light-dark directly. Instead, you mix the underlying substances, the elemental compounds. These compounds have different inherent degrees of transparency or opacity.
Ah, so you mix, say, something mostly fiery with something mostly watery.
And you get a new compound substance that has an intermediate degree of transparency. Because transparency depends on the fiery element, this new intermediate transparency results in an intermediate color, a specific ratio of light and dark determined by the substance's nature. It's a clever way around the puzzles, grounding color in the nature of the mixed substance itself.
Okay, so we've gone through rejecting effluences, understanding light as a state, color as a power, acting on that state via a medium generated by mixtures. This all builds towards Aristotle's ultimate picture of perception, right? The big takeaway.
It absolutely does. The general characterization that pulls it all together.
Yeah.
Perception is the capacity to become like the perceived object is in its sensible quality by assimilating its sensible form without the matter. This is the final, definitive rejection of Empedocles' material ingestion.
Form without matter. And he uses the wax analogy to explain this, but differently than Plato did.
Right. Plato used wax getting stamped by a stylus for memory or judgment. Aristotle shifts it. The wax receives an impression from a signet ring.
Why the ring? What's the difference?
It's crucial. The wax takes on the form, the pattern, the insignia from the ring, but it doesn't take on the matter, the gold or bronze the ring is made of. That's non-material assimilation. When we see the sun's whiteness, our sense takes on the form whiteness without taking on the sun's matter.
And a signet ring, that implies something specific, something individuated, more than just a random mark from a stylus.
Exactly. The seal is tied to its owner. It has a source, an identity. This suggests the external color doesn't just cause a sensation in us, it actually constitutively shapes our sensory awareness. The visual experience is the way it is because the external color's form is present in the awareness. The experience directly reflects the object's quality.
So this is fundamentally different from saying light hits the eye, causes nerve signals, which then cause a mental event called seeing white. For Aristotle, the whiteness itself, the form, is somehow in the act of seeing.
That's the heart of it. The form is assimilated by the sense organ's capacity. It's like, think of a master craftsman, a swordsmith. The art of sword making, the form or blueprint, is in his soul. But there isn't an actual sword inside his soul, right? Our sense consciousness takes on the quality of the object without taking on its substance.
Okay, final piece. How does this assimilation of form square with the idea of change? Empedocles thought seeing was a change, maybe a destructive one. Aristotle needs to refine this.
He does, by distinguishing two kinds of change, or transitions to actuality. The first kind is like learning something new. You go from ignorance to knowledge. The ignorance is destroyed and replaced. Or water going from cool to hot, the coolness is gone. That's a destructive alteration.
But sensation, seeing, isn't like that.
No. That's the second kind of transition, a preservative change. It's like going from having knowledge to actively using it, or going from having the capacity to see to actually seeing. You don't destroy the capacity by using it, you fulfill it, you perfect it. Seeing isn't one state replacing another, it's the realization of the eye's nature. It's what he calls a complete activity. The end is in the activity itself. You see and have seen at the same moment.
Which is why he calls perception only an alteration of a sort. It doesn't quite fit the normal destructive model of change.
Precisely. It's an etiolated sense of alteration, because it's not about becoming something different by destroying a prior state, but about fulfilling a potentiality that was already there. It's the sense organ reaching its state of perfection in the act of perceiving. This ensures the experience is perfect reception of form, not a messy material exchange.
And that finally solves the puzzle Empedocles started with.
Yes. Seeing is taking in the form of the seen, qualitatively, not materially. We assimilate the sensible form without the matter. Since no matter is ingested, the effluence can't screen off the object. The experience becomes like the remote object because it has assimilated its form. And that direct qualitative likeness guarantees the objectivity of perception, even across a distance, without physical contact.
What a journey. From literal particles being swallowed by the eye.
All the way to Aristotle's incredibly sophisticated account. The object is real and external. Light is a state of a medium. Color is the object's power to affect that state. And seeing is the sense organ becoming qualitatively like the object by assimilating its form without its matter.
The huge leap really was distinguishing form from matter. That's what allowed Aristotle to explain how we can know about a distant world without physically consuming it.
And that core idea, assimilating the sensible form, is what underpins the objectivity. If your experience is constitutively shaped by the external object's form, then the experience literally couldn't be the way it is if that object wasn't there, acting on the medium and then your senses.
Which leaves a fascinating question for you, listening now. When you see that blue sky or that red apple, does the feeling of objectivity, the sense that you're seeing something real, depend on that Aristotelian idea? That your experience is somehow constituted by the external thing? Or are you more aligned with the modern view that the color is ultimately just a state inside your own mind, triggered by, but separate from, the external world?
Something to definitely think about next time you look around.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into form without matter.